Every Monday, exactly at 9 o'clock in the morning, I sent $700 to my parents. Not because they needed it, but because I was afraid. Afraid of my mother's sigh. Afraid of my father's cold stare that could freeze straight down my spine. Afraid of feeling like an extra piece in the very family that gave birth to me. Last week, they ignored my daughter's birthday. Not a single message. Not a single wish. Not a single reason. That afternoon, when my hands trembled as I called to ask, my father's voice came through the phone. Dry. Sharp. As if I were a stranger. Your child means nothing to us. I stood frozen in the dim kitchen. Evan's birthday balloon still carrying the faint smell of sugar candy. The candle hadn't even finished burning. The cake untouched. Just missing the people had been waiting for all day. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I simply opened my phone and deleted each payment. Every tap severed another thread that had tied me down for so many years. And when I finally deleted the very last one, my phone suddenly vibrated. A message appeared. Short. Cold. And that message was the thing that began pulling my entire family into a storm they never saw coming. Before I tell you what happened after that message, tell me where you're watching this video from. I read every comment to know you're still here with me. If you've ever had to learn how to protect your child from your own relatives, hit like and subscribe, because no one deserves to face that alone. Now then, let's go back to that night. The moment I realized silence could become a storm of its own. 40 minutes after I cut off every single payment, my mother texted me. The last light of the day poured into the small kitchen in Lake Garden. But it wasn't warm enough to chase away the cold spreading from inside my chest. Water from the sink flowed over my fingertips, icy, sharp, like needles touching skin. I stood there, frozen, and my father's words kept echoing in my head like a fresh cut from a knife. Evan means nothing to us. I turned around and looked at the dining table. The cake I made for Evan lay still. The candles had long gone out, wax dripping into hardened curves that looked like solid tears. The birthday balloons, once gold-tinted, now drooped as if they too had lost hope since this afternoon. I picked up my phone. No shaking. Just emptiness. Each payment appeared. The electricity bill, medication, car repairs, groceries. And every time I tapped cancel, it felt like I was unfastening another invisible lock they had trapped me in under the name of daughterly duty. By the time I deleted the final payment, the house became too quiet, too wide, too real. Evan was sleeping in the next room after an entire day waiting for the people he called Grandpa and Grandma. His breathing, though soft, cut into me more than my father's words ever could. I thought they would stay silent. But people who survive on someone else's sacrifice never stay silent. My phone buzzed. A single vibration, but it felt like it shook my entire chest. A message from Patricia. Order dinner for me. Honey chicken. Same as last time. No apology. No mention of Evan. Not a question of concern. Not a breath of remorse. Just another familiar demand. Cold. Blunt. Shameless. I sat down. The light from the screen reflected on my face. Greenish. Pale. And distorted like a warped shadow of myself. I read it again. And again. Still the same sentence. Something inside me sank. Not pain. Not anger anymore. But a numb kind of clarity. They knew I had cut the payments. And their very first reaction was not panic. Not outrage. Not shame. But, who's paying for dinner? I leaned back in the chair. Tilted my head toward the ceiling. A small crack on the white plaster. Something I had never noticed before. Suddenly appeared unbelievably clear. Just like my family. Still a house. Still sharing the same last name. But cracked long ago. I just hadn't wanted to look. My mother's old lines flashed through my mind. Remember your dad's medication money? Don't make me remind you again. You transferred it already. Right. Never once. Vivian, are you okay? How is Evan? Do you need me? I pressed my fingers lightly on the edge of the table, feeling the rough wood bite into my skin. Only by hurting a little could I stay grounded in reality. The truth was, I had spent too many years trying to please a family that never wanted me present, unless my wallet was open. I set the phone on the table, face down. For the first time in many years, I didn't need to see their messages. Outside, the wind slipped through the window. The trees behind the house brushed against each other like fingers tapping on a door. Soft, but reminding. I closed my eyes. I whispered a small sentence that sounded like a lock dropping to the floor. Am not paying to be loved anymore. After saying it, my chest felt lighter. Not by much, but enough for me to know I had stepped half a foot out of an invisible prison. I stood up, turned off the stove, turned off the living room lights, let the house sink into the soft blue glow coming from Evan's room. I thought everything had paused there. That Patricia's message was the final blow of the day. I was wrong. Very wrong. My phone lit up. A new notification. The sender. Not my mother. Not my father. I opened it, and in a single breath, I knew the storm hadn't even begun. The second message was the signal of a truth I had never prepared myself to face. The second message was not from my parents, and it opened a door I had never dared to look into. The sender's name appeared on the screen. Mark Ellison, landlord. I had never spoken to him. He shouldn't even have my number. The message had only 2 lines. Vivian, this month's rent hasn't arrived. Is something wrong? I froze. My heart jolted. A single heavy beat knocked out of rhythm. Why was he asking? Me. That house belonged to my parents. I had no responsibility for a home. They had never once invited Evan to step inside. But the way Mark wrote, familiar, polite, almost as if he considered me the primary contact. I called immediately. A very bad feeling crawled down my spine. Mark knew more than a landlord should. And apparently, I was involved more than I ever realized. Mark picked up on the second ring. His voice was deep and courteous. Oh, Vivian. Thank you for calling back. I was a bit concerned since this is the first time you've been late. I frowned. The first time I'm late? He paused for a second. Yes. Since you're the one who pays the rent. The air around me seemed to stop. I'm sorry. Me. Your parents said you handle the finances. For 8 months now. You've always transferred the rent at 9 o'clock every Monday morning. I gripped the edge of the table just to stay upright. 8 months. For 8 whole months I had been sending them money privately, and also accidentally paying their rent. How long have they been telling you that? Since they moved to Lake Garden. 3 years. 3 years. I narrowed my eyes, trying to force my memory to sharpen. 3 years, they told me. We can manage. Don't worry about the house. When in reality, I had been paying for them for 3 years without knowing it. I thanked Mark and hung up. My hand was shaking so badly I had to set the phone down. The screen lit up again. The name displayed. Damon Hale. I answered. He didn't greet me. He asked straight. You really cut the money? Yes. Good. I just cut mine too. I froze. You also sent them money. A long exhale from the other end. Not as much as you. But they're used to it. And they never told me you were sending anything. I squinted. You mean... They split us? No. They hid both of us from each other. So each one of us would think, if I don't help, I'm the worst child. That sentence hit me straight in the center of my chest. Sharp. Clear. Brutal. Damon's voice softened, becoming hoarse. Viv, you're not crazy. You're not cruel. I'm on your side. I braced a hand against the table, trying to steady my breathing. Not because I was tired, but because the truth was becoming too clear. My family had been built on the silence of each child, and they had used our guilt to feed themselves. That afternoon, another notification appeared. Patricia Hale is live. I tapped it. The screen opened to my mother sitting before a camera, tissue in hand like a performance prop. Howard sat next to her, trying to hold a dignified posture. Patricia lifted the tissue, speaking in a trembling voice I knew was fake. Vivian is making up lies about our family. We never abandoned her, Howard added, a voice cold as stone. She forced us to accept money. We never asked. I let out a laugh. Thin, like the final thread snapping. And then the worst thing happened. Patricia held up a photo of Evan, a picture of him in his blue shirt at his birthday. Howard looked into the camera. That child has nothing to do with us. The world around me went dark. Not because the lights went out, but because pain had become too heavy for the light to stand upright. That night, while I sat beside Evan, my phone lit up again. Aunt Celia sent you a video. I opened it. It was footage of the family gathering. The camera was a bit shaky, but the audio was perfectly clear. A relative said, "I can't believe they said that about Evan." Another voice, "They're digging their own grave." Then Aunt Celia pointed the camera directly at herself and spoke firmly. "Vivian, you need to see this. They brought this on themselves. Now the whole family knows the truth." I sat still. No tears. No shaking. Just one feeling. The storm had just begun to change direction. I didn't know yet that Celia would be the one who pushed my parents past the point of control. I didn't post anything. I didn't say anything. But the next morning, the entire town already knew. My phone buzzed nonstop from 7 o'clock in the morning. Notification after notification. The sender's name, changing every few seconds. I opened a message from a former coworker. "Vivian, are you okay? Have you seen this clip?" "Clip? What clip?" I tapped it. The screen opened the live stream from yesterday. The one where Patricia and Howard played the victims. But this time, it had been trimmed, given dramatic background music, and plastered with giant subtitles. Grandmother denies grandchild in front of 200 people. There was a freeze frame right on Howard's line. "This child has nothing to do with us." Seeing Evan's face frozen in that frame, my chest tightened like something was being pulled inward. The clip had nearly 8,000 views. In just a few hours. I didn't share it. I didn't need to. Lake Garden was doing it for me. What I didn't expect was the people who once stood with them were the first to turn against them. The first message came from the church. The same church Patricia had bragged to me about dozens of times, calling herself a model woman. "Mrs. Hale, we need to discuss the content of your live stream." Not supported. Not sympathy. But questioning. A group of neighbors sent me a private message. "We're not taking sides, but no child deserves to be spoken to like that." A high school friend wrote, "Howard is always preaching morals, and he does that." I scrolled through the comments under the viral clip. No one has the right to say that to a kid. What kind of parents are these? That poor child. This woman is acting. Lake Garden is small. She's done for. Each line sounded like a hammer striking the reputation they had spent years building. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth was speaking for me. At 11 o'clock, Mark Ellison called. His voice was deep and direct. The kind of man, too, used to watching families collapse under their own weight. Vivian, I hate to call again, but I need to let you know. The rent account still hasn't received anything. I stayed silent. He continued. I just went to their house. They didn't answer the door. I'll have to issue a formal notice. The text came right after. Notice to vacate. 30 days. I stared at those words for a long time. Not happy. Not triumphant. Just calm. Because for the first time in my life, consequences were falling on the people who actually deserved them. I set my phone down on the table. Suddenly, the faint smell of cold coffee floated up. Bitter, but light. In the afternoon, Aunt Celia called. She spoke briefly. You should see this. She sent a video. The scene showed the backyard of a relative's house. Crowded. A long dinner table. Children playing. Patricia and Howard stood in the center. Pale. All dignity gone. An uncle spoke. Patricia, why would you say that about Evan? Howard tried to argue. You don't understand. Aunt Celia cut him off. No. We understand perfectly. Single parents out here love their kids more than you two love your own grandchild. Something clattered in the background. Everyone stared at them like they were strangers. Another aunt muttered, quietly, but loud enough to be caught on video. The two of you disgrace the whole family. Patricia stood frozen, lips trembling but unable to speak. Howard looked around, searching for someone to defend him, but no one met his eyes. The clip ended with only one sentence from Aunt Celia. No one did anything to them. They did it to themselves. I watched the entire video in silence. No interruptions. No comments. My apartment was so quiet I could hear the second hand gliding across the clock face. Evan was coloring at the table. He hummed a little song to himself. A world completely different from the chaotic war happening outside. I looked at my son, and I realized I hadn't run from that family because I was afraid, but because I chose peace for him. The storm was tearing apart everything that belonged to them, but I stood outside it, dry and steady. And for the first time, I saw something clearly. I didn't need revenge. The truth was doing it for me. But I didn't know yet. Tomorrow would be the day the Hale family collapsed from the inside out. I thought everything had calmed down. But people terrified of losing face never leave anything alone. The next morning, I woke up early to prepare breakfast for Evan. The kitchen was quiet, the smell of toasted bread drifting softly, but my phone was anything but quiet. Notifications flooded in nonstop. Messenger. Email. Voicemail. I opened the first message. It was from a distant aunt. Your mother said you made everything up for attention. Is that true? Vivian. I froze. My fingers tingled. The kind of tingling when the body wants to run, but the mind forces it to stay still. Another message arrived right after. Howard said that video was edited. They never said that. I closed my eyes. One long breath. So long my chest ached. They were doing what I knew they were best at, turning white into black. Patricia was mass messaging relatives. Vivian is emotionally unstable because she's raising a child alone. She needs help, not people listening to her. We never said anything about Evan. Evan ran around the living room with his toy truck, laughing, totally unaware that his grandparents were trying to erase him from the family story. I bent down to tie his shoelaces. The faint smell of children's shampoo drifted up. Sweet, clean, heartbreaking. I knew this was just the beginning. They weren't only lying about me. They were beginning to construct an entirely different version of me. By noon, my phone lit up with a long message from an old high school acquaintance. Someone I hadn't spoken to in 10 years. Vivian, your mom said you're intentionally keeping Evan away from the family. Are you okay? Do you need someone to talk to? Keeping Evan away from the family. My hand tightened until my knuckles turned white. I opened Facebook. A new post from Patricia. Being a parent is hard. Sometimes children misunderstand us and hurt the family just to get attention. Dozens of comments poured in, comforting her, praising her, checking on her, calling me ungrateful. In their eyes, Patricia was the victim. Howard was the gentle father. I was the brat causing online drama. I sat down, my head tilted slightly toward the window, the gray midday light making everything look even more exhausted. They were rebuilding a different Vivian, a distorted version, a shadow that wasn't me. In the afternoon, my phone buzzed again. A message from an old coworker. I heard you're under heavy stress. Don't post family issues online anymore. People judge a lot. I bit my lip so hard I nearly drew blood. I had never posted anything. I had never said a single word. But Patricia and Howard had spread their version long enough, wide enough, for people to believe it. The small world of Lake Garden was like a pond. Drop a single spot of ink in it, and it spreads fast. I stood up, walked a few steps back and forth in the kitchen. Evan sat at the table, coloring a picture of a green dinosaur. He looked up and asked softly, "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa still mad at me?" A 6-year-old wondering that, and my heart tore another inch. I knelt down in front of him, brushed his hair gently. "It's not your fault. It's never your fault." I was speaking to him, but truly, I was speaking to myself. Late afternoon, when the sky turned golden, the phone rang. Damon. I picked up immediately. His voice was tight, restrained. "Viv, are you seeing what they're posting?" "I see." "I can't take it anymore." Damon inhaled deeply, as if he was keeping himself from breaking something. "I just overheard their conversation with Aunt Marcia. They said you made everything up because you're lonely, that you want Evan to cut ties with the family. Every word is a lie." I leaned back against the refrigerator. The cold metal soaked through my shirt. "Viv, I have proof." Someone recorded it. I opened my eyes. My voice was barely above a whisper. "Who?" "Not me. Celia. Celia. The woman who stood up for me in front of the whole family the day before." Damon's voice dropped lower, controlled. "You need to be ready. Celia is about to send you something that will change this entire story." I felt myself standing at the edge of a different kind of pain and a different kind of truth. Night fell slowly. The streetlight cast a pale layer over the wooden table like a thin sheet of frost. Evan had fallen asleep on the sofa, clutching his green dinosaur. I sat beside him, staring at my phone lying face down, not wanting to touch it, not wanting to read anything else. But it buzzed. Once. Slow. Heavy. I flipped it over. Aunt Celia sent one voice message. 0 minutes 48 seconds. I stared at the number. 48 seconds. 48 seconds that could unravel 3 years of lies. 48 seconds that could rip off the masks Patricia and Howard had worn for 30 years. I tapped it. Set the phone on the table. The first sound came through. A woman's voice. Hoarse but clear. "Patricia, you should know. Everyone already heard Howard's sentence. You can't undo it anymore." My hand trembled. I gripped the seat. Then another voice cut in. Howard's. Not live stream. Not acting. Raw. Real. Sharp as a blade. Let her think she's right. What matters is the public believing us. I shot upright. Not from anger, but because, for the first time, I knew I was stepping into a territory they could no longer control. I didn't know then that those 48 seconds would destroy the image they'd spent 30 years building. But I was ready to watch it fall. 40 minutes after I cut off every single payment, My mother texted me. The last light of the day poured into the small kitchen in Lake Garden. But it wasn't warm enough to chase away the cold spreading from inside my chest. Water from the sink flowed over my fingertips, icy, sharp, like needles touching skin. I stood there, frozen, and my father's words kept echoing in my head like a fresh cut from a knife. Evan means nothing to us. I turned around and looked at the dining table. The cake I made for Evan lay still. The candles had long gone out, wax dripping into hardened curves that looked like solid tears. The birthday balloons, once gold-tinted, now drooped as if they too had lost hope since this afternoon. I picked up my phone. No shaking. Just emptiness. Each payment appeared. The electricity bill, medication, car repairs, groceries. And every time I tapped cancel, it felt like I was unfastening another invisible lock they had trapped me in under the name of daughterly duty. By the time I deleted the final payment, the house became too quiet, too wide, too real. Evan was sleeping in the next room after an entire day waiting for the people he called Grandpa and Grandma. His breathing, though soft, cut into me more than my father's words ever could. I thought they would stay silent. But people who survive on someone else's sacrifice never stay silent. My phone buzzed. A single vibration, but it felt like it shook my entire chest. A message from Patricia. Order dinner for me. Honey chicken. Same as last time. No apology. No mention of Evan. Not a question of concern. Not a breath of remorse. Just another familiar demand. Cold. Blunt. Shameless. I sat down. The light from the screen reflected on my face. Greenish, pale, and distorted like a warped shadow of myself. I read it again. And again. Still the same sentence. Something inside me sank. Not pain. Not anger anymore. But a numb kind of clarity. They knew I had cut the payments. And their very first reaction was not panic. Not outrage. Not shame. But, who's paying for dinner? I leaned back in the chair, tilted my head toward the ceiling. A small crack on the white plaster, something I had never noticed before, suddenly appeared unbelievably clear. Just like my family. Still a house. Still sharing the same last name. But cracked long ago. I just hadn't wanted to look. My mother's old lines flashed through my mind. Remember your dad's medication money? Don't make me remind you again. You transferred it already. Right. Never once. Vivian, are you okay? How is Evan? Do you need me? I pressed my fingers lightly on the edge of the table, feeling the rough wood bite into my skin. Only by hurting a little could I stay grounded in reality. The truth was, I had spent too many years trying to please a family that never wanted me present, unless my wallet was open. I set the phone on the table, face down. For the first time in many years, I didn't need to see their messages. Outside, the wind slipped through the window. The trees behind the house brushed against each other like fingers tapping on a door. Soft, but reminding. I closed my eyes. I whispered a small sentence that sounded like a lock dropping to the floor. Am not paying to be loved anymore. After saying it, my chest felt lighter. Not by much. But enough for me to know I had stepped half a foot out of an invisible prison. I stood up, turned off the stove, turned off the living room lights. Let the house sink into the soft blue glow coming from Evan's room. I thought everything had paused there. That Patricia's message was the final blow of the day. I was wrong. Very wrong. My phone lit up. A new notification. The sender. Not my mother. Not my father. I opened it. And in a single breath, I knew the storm hadn't even begun. The second message was the signal of a truth I had never prepared myself to face. There are rooms that don't need anyone to shout. Truth alone is loud enough to crack every wall. Aunt Celia's house sat at the end of Lake Garden. Red tiles. A wide backyard. Wooden chairs arranged in a circle. Like a normal family gathering. But no one was normal. When I led Evan inside, every pair of eyes turned to me. Not judging. Not pitying. Just waiting. Patricia stood near the doorway. Earrings gleaming. A smile stretched too tightly to stay calm. Howard adjusted his collar. Holding himself like tonight had nothing to do with him. Damon approached. His voice low. "Viv, if it gets overwhelming, take Evan outside." I nodded. But inside, I knew I wasn't going anywhere. Aunt Celia clapped her hands once. The room fell silent. "Let's begin." I thought they would deny everything. I didn't expect their own voices to be the thing that buried them deepest. Celia placed the phone on the glass table. The surface reflected the yellow light. Cold, but clear. She pressed play. Patricia's voice rang out. So clear it felt like she was speaking right there in the room. "Vivian is weak. Shell, get scared. Shell, stay quiet." A relative covered their mouth. Howard's voice followed. "As long as the public believes us." No one moved. No one breathed loudly. Then the sentence that froze the entire room. "Evan isn't even our grandchild." I heard someone drop a metal spoon. The clang echoed through the stillness. Patricia's face drained of color. Howard clenched his jaw. But the file kept playing. And the final line shattered the Hale family completely. "She doesn't belong to this family." When the 48 seconds ended, the room sank into a silence no one dared to break. Patricia spoke first. That's not the full story." Celia cut the audio. Celia stared straight at her, eyes hard as steel. I pressed play. Nothing else. Howard jumped in. "You people don't understand the context." "That girl." Damon stood up. "Dad, stop talking." The room held its breath. Howard had never been cut off by Damon in front of anyone. Patricia tried to salvage the last pieces of her image. "We did this because we care about Evan. Because Vivian is unstable." An older relative spoke. "Unstable is who? The girl you insulted? Or the two of you?" Not one person stood with them. Not one. Damon stepped into the center of the room. His voice low, trembling. Not from fear, but from years held tight inside. "You all think the way they treated Vivian is new. It's not. They did the same to me." A wave of murmurs spread. He swallowed, then continued. "When I went to college, they said I had mental issues, so the relatives would stop helping with my tuition. They told everyone I was making things up, that I was embarrassing them." Patricia shouted. "Damon, you're exaggerating." He turned and for the first time looked at his mother not as a son but as a grown man standing before the truth. "No, I'm telling the truth." Howard stared at the floor. His hand trembled. The first time I had ever seen it. Evan tugged my sleeve. His tiny voice. "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa mad at me because I did something wrong?" The entire room went still. Patricia opened her mouth. "No, sweetie." But Evan continued, his childish voice cutting sharper than any adult accusation. "Why did they say I'm not their grandchild?" Patricia froze as if slapped. Howard turned away. One relative burst into tears. Another whispered, "Dear God." The child heard everything. No one rescued them from that moment. No one defended them. No one. Celia stood. Her voice wasn't loud, but it rose like a verdict. "What have you done? This child has never harmed anyone, and Vivian has never betrayed this family." Patricia's lips trembled. "We were just trying to protect our reputation." An older uncle. respected by everyone, slammed his hand on the table. What reputation is left when you deny your own grandchild? He looked directly at them. Howard, Patricia, you have no place in this family. Not if you treat that child like that. The room nodded as one. It was one of the rare moments I saw truth triumph over pretense. Without a single curse. I lifted Evan into my arms. His warm little body eased every last weight in me. I didn't look at Patricia. I didn't look at Howard. I didn't need to. As I walked out, I heard someone whisper behind me, "Vivian doesn't need revenge. They already did it themselves." I opened the door and stepped outside. The night wind of Lake Garden brushed against my face. Cold, but gentle like a new breath. For the first time in so many years, I felt peace isn't something you beg for. It's something you deserve. But I didn't know yet. In just 24 hours, everything would change again, in a way I never expected. The next morning, I woke up without the feeling that I needed to defend myself against the entire world anymore. Early sunlight stretched into long lines across the wooden floor of my Lake Garden apartment. No heaviness in my chest. No fear of who would call, who would blame, or who would twist the story. Evan was still asleep, hugging his green dinosaur, his breathing soft like wind brushing against a door. I stood in the kitchen, poured water into the kettle. The sound of water hitting metal filled the quiet room, the lightest sound. Yet, it made me feel alive. For the first time in many years, I didn't feel like I was running from anyone. I just stood still, and at peace. As for them, they had to pay for the story they crafted themselves. The first message of the day came from their church. "We need to talk again about what the two of you shared. No comfort. No defense. Just distance." A neighbor named Patricia used to brag about messaging me. "Vivian, I'm sorry for believing them. I watched the meeting last night. I'm shocked." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The Hale family wasn't taken down. They exposed themselves. And for the first time, I wasn't the one explaining, fixing, or enduring. I simply stepped out of that loop. Close to noon, Damon knocked on the door. He stood there, hands in pockets, carrying the awkwardness of someone who had been wounded too long but was learning how to heal. "I brought food," he said quietly. Inside the container were Evan's favorite waffles and the salad I usually ate when stressed. Evan ran out and hugged Damon instantly. No hesitation. "Uncle Damon, were you mad at Grandma and Grandpa yesterday?" Damon hesitated. I answered instead. "He's not mad at you. He's mad at adults who said the wrong things." Damon looked at me, a look I'd never seen before. As if for the first time, he saw me not shaking, not shrinking, and not begging for anyone's approval. Just being myself. "Viv, you're going to be okay," he said. "No, I'm already okay," I replied. In the afternoon, Evan brought his little chair to the balcony, coloring under the warm sunlight. A moment later, he turned to me. "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa still mad at me?" The question was soft as a breeze, yet it tugged hard at my heart. I knelt beside him, placed my hand gently on his back, as if returning every piece of peace into his tiny body. "Evan, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes adults behave badly because they're afraid to look at their own mistakes." He tilted his head, thinking for a few seconds. "So, do I need to say sorry?" I smiled. The first smile that didn't hurt. "No, you don't owe them anything." Evan nodded and continued coloring. His strokes weren't shaky like the day before. I knew this child would grow up without carrying the darkness they tried to put on him. As the sky dimmed, I stood by the window, watched the trees sway in the wind. I thought about all the years I tried to belong to that family, silencing my own sighs, accepting their coldness, and blaming myself for not being good enough. Then I realized the biggest change wasn't them. It was me. I no longer sought their approval, no longer begged for a place, no longer tried to mend someone else's cracks. I simply chose to step out and let light fill the corner of life I was living. While I was cleaning the kitchen, my phone buzzed. A new email. I opened it. Subject: Vivian. I think it's time you knew this. Aunt Celia. Just one sentence. Short. But the words made my heart stop for a beat. I looked at Evan building Lego pieces on the floor, completely unaware that this email would become the final piece forcing me to face a deeper truth about the Hale family. I didn't know what Celia was about to say, but I could feel it. This would be the last chapter I needed to close this story for good. The final truth didn't hurt me. It explained why I had been hurt. That night, after Evan fell asleep, I opened Celia's email. The lines appeared slowly, as if she knew I needed to read each sentence with my own breath. Vivian, you once asked why Howard and Patricia always saw you as a shadow. I froze. It wasn't because you lacked anything. It was because they carried too much fear from their old generations. She wrote about the times Patricia was belittled by her own family, the years Howard grew up in a house filled only with shouting, and the burdens they never healed. And in the end, they poured them onto the child who was easiest to bruise. They don't know how to love. Vivian, but that was never your fault. I set the phone down. A small, gentle emptiness opened inside my chest. Not pain, not anger. Just clarity. I sat in the living room, the warm yellow light reflecting off a half-finished glass of water. I thought about my father, my mother, all the sentences that had made me curl into myself for so many years. But tonight, I didn't want to win. I didn't want them to understand. I didn't need the validation I once craved so desperately. I just wanted peace. And to let go. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved freedom. I walked into Evan's room. The boy was asleep, still hugging his green dinosaur, lips slightly parted as if dreaming something gentle. I pulled the blanket over him. Tomorrow, he would wake up in a home without shouting, without the shadows of adults, without questions a child should never have to ask. And I knew that alone meant I had already won. I stood by the window. The cold wind moved through the trees outside, but inside me was a different kind of warmth. I thought, family isn't where we are born. Family is where we feel safe being ourselves. And if one day Evan asks why we only have each other, I will say, because I chose you. I chose us. And I chose peace. If you've listened this far, thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you've ever had to leave a relationship just to protect yourself, I want you to know, you're not weak. You're simply living truthfully. If any part of this story touched you, tap like, so the algorithm knows stories about self-respect still matter. And if you want to hear more stories about strength, boundaries, and healing, please subscribe so I can share many more meaningful and heartfelt stories with you.